Welcome to our series, Breaking Through for Mission Advantage, where we look at how the strategic shift to integrated software-defined IT platforms can help agencies advance their digital strategies and achieve greater mission outcomes. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and here to talk about how the General Services Administration is helping federal agencies to advance their digital and modernization initiatives is Ann Lewis, Director of Technology Transformation Services at GSA. Ann, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Wyatt. I'm really happy to be here.
And just to get started, give us a brief snapshot of your portfolio at the Technology Transformation Services.
Technology Transformation Services is a now more than 500-person strong organization of technologists of all stripes. And we have a very broad portfolio from consulting organizations like 18F, Centers of Excellence, to fellowship programs like the Presidential Innovation Fellows and the United States Digital Corps. And then a long list of product teams like Login, FedRAMP, US Web Design System, digital.gov, USA.gov. And so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to lead this organization. We're doing so much exciting work across the software stack and across government.
Well, I'm very interested to get started with this first question in asking, what key infrastructure modernization initiatives are you prioritizing at the Technology Transformation Services? And how is GSA trying to help agencies advance those initiatives to improve their mission outcomes?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. Infrastructure modernization work is a large part of what we do at TTS, and it's a large part of the challenge of doing tech work in government. Infrastructure modernizations and legacy system migrations in particular are one of the most challenging types of implementation projects to pull off, in my experience, in both government and the private sector. And this is because doing modernization work involves inventorying all of your data, all of your features, all of your workflows, all of your users, all of the ways that users interact with workflows. And after you make this giant inventory, you separate out the inventory into universes of functionality and data, and then you have to make hard choices about what do you carry forward with a modernization activity? What do you sunset? What do you re-envision? And you have to do all of this work before you even decide what kind of new platform you're going to move to. And so this involves a lot of hard choices. And in some cases, hard choices to right-size your system complexity based on current user needs. And if you don't do this, if you just keep everything that you've ever built forever, your system costs will grow and grow until they're unsustainable and you'll have a really complicated user experience. So it takes a lot of strong product managers and technologists at different levels to help agencies figure out how to make these hard choices together. And there are always good reasons for why old systems are the way they are, even though everyone likes to complain about how government tech is really broken. Probably every single decision that yielded a broken user experience came from some good intention or from some regulation that was written a certain way or law that was written a certain way. And so you really need to understand what are those core decisions and acknowledge what they are, and then decide, are we carrying forward those assumptions or challenging some of those assumptions? Are we changing some of those reasons? You got to do that before you start modernization planning, or you'll just end up with a slightly different version of the broken system that you're working with. So TTS works with agencies to address all of these challenges at all parts of the modernization lifecycle, from our consulting organizations teaming up with agencies to do that inventorying and planning, to do some of the capacity building work, to actually help manage some of the implementation work. And we also build a lot of products and services that agencies can use to help themselves with modernization activities. But this is the core challenge of government tech.
So that all sounds very daunting, I'm sure. So, but kind of putting a different lens on it, what do you see as the consequences to agency missions if they don't make or don't take a platform approach in implementing modernization?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, a platform approach is critical to success. Because of the way that budget and decision-making authority is distributed across government and then across agencies, programs and systems tend to get really siloed over time. And when programs and systems are siloed, then your data is siloed, your processes are siloed, your systems get really complex, and this just makes everything harder. It's hard to know what your users are actually doing if you have 100 or 1,000 different user databases. And of course, it's harder to pull off modernization activities that involve 10 or 100 separately managed systems. So without a platform approach, systems grow to be more complex and expensive over time. Users have really confusing experiences, And vendors who could sell an agency an enterprise solution will instead end up bidding on smaller siloed one-off solutions that end up forcing them to deploy the same SaaS products into each program or across an agency over and over, which then ends up entrenching the siloing and then driving up costs for agencies. So I think taking a platform approach to enterprise architecture, data, and modernization planning helps agency decision makers pull back from the silos and understand holistically what users need, what the ideal architecture of the system should look like, and how all of the parts of the system should interoperate. And this lets you plan in a human-centered way that can actually scale over time. And it can also help agencies make purchasing choices that meet the needs of the whole system and not just a few pieces of it.
Well, can you point to some examples of where infrastructure modernization has helped agencies advance their digital strategies and achieve more effective mission outcomes, maybe at a more accelerated rate?
Our consulting organizations do this work all the time, and I'd love to lift up the examples of the Centers of Excellence. They have a center focused on IT modernization that takes a holistic approach, not just to where we're pointing at where the problem is, this piece of technology or this process, but rather working deeply across all of the people who are driving the program forward and understanding who within those agencies can make long-term change. And then we help that agency take a platform approach and pull back and see the system as a whole, and then partner with industry as quickly as we can through assisted acquisition to address our partners' unique challenges. Our 18F consulting team also is working on a couple of really interesting modernization projects. One of them is they're working with NOAA on modernizing weather.gov. And this is one of my favorite government websites. If you also live in DC, you know that in the morning it might be 70 degrees, in the afternoon it might be 30. You just never know. So I feel like I'm constantly checking weather.gov. And while that core weather data is always going to stay the same and be critical to our ability to layer ourselves appropriately, the user experience is something that people have different needs based on whether they're on web or mobile, based on how they're consuming the data. And so they're doing some really interesting user research with weather.gov to try and understand how to build better government experiences with that kind of data. And that to me is like a great example because it shows that modernization work needs to happen at all levels of the system stack, from the front end to the system to the data. And there are opportunities to improve everywhere you go. 18F is also working with the United States Digital Service on the Direct File project with the IRS, which is hoping to modernize the way taxpayers can engage with filing their taxes directly with the government. So there's so much work that we're doing, and it's all really exciting. I'd also like to lift up OMB, Office of the Chief Information Officer's Digital Experience Policy Framework, which outlines key patterns for successful modernization activities from design to content to data to security. Modernization work can be really intimidating. So if you want to figure out how can you ensure that you're hitting all of your bases and really taking a holistic approach to modernizing from a all of government perspective, that's a great policy framework to look at. And we're helping agencies work on specific projects related to that as well.
And I'm sure modernization really goes hand in hand with being able to achieve those improvements as well. Lastly, Anne, what other recommendations would you make to the heads of agencies about how to take greater advantage of TTS to advance or better leverage their digital strategies?
Philosophically, I would ask heads of agencies to think about system design and development and modernization as not just a one-time budget line item, but also something that you have to think about ongoing maintenance for. After you create a new system that powers a program, you have to pay to maintain it forever and ever as long as it's being used. And there will always be changes in the technology ecosystem and changes in user needs. And you have to invest in that ongoing maintenance to be able to meet those users' needs. The longer you delay or minimize ongoing maintenance, the bigger the modernization debt you have to handle in the future. And then this in it by itself constructs the shape and size of later modernization emergencies or needs. And you could often end up, if you defer modernization, paying more later. So I think that's an important thing to think about, is that the way that we budget for tech-powered projects is just fundamentally different than the way we budget for other kinds of government work. But I'd also like to tell them that since everybody, when you are forced to take on a modernization activity, you have to think carefully about controlling for risk. So I think there are 3 key ways to de-risk and drive implementation success for modernizations. The first one is make sure that you have strong product managers at the table for the whole process so that you can make those hard choices about what to sunset versus re-envision versus carry forward when you're doing the modernization work. And empower leaders with enough information to understand what choices they're making now and what the implications of those choices will be in the future. The second thing is everyone involved in modernization work, from the agency teams to the vendors, should work iteratively. The best way to assure that a modernization will fail will be to take money, throw it over the wall to the vendor, and check back in a year to see how things are going. There are always ways to break up the work and make it iterative. And the more you add user checkpoints to test what you're doing and what your assumptions are with users as you go, the less likely you are to fail. And then the third thing I would recommend is you really need to nail down your enterprise data strategy first before you proceed in all the implementation work. If you have an established can't fail system, it's got a bunch of data somewhere in a particular format. And then when you start building your new system, the way you structure your data and the way you sort of transform it from old to new filters up through your entire application, and also can either be the key to your success or add a lot of risk. So ensuring that you really understand what your enterprise data strategy is, and that you've also checked your assumptions on that, that can help a lot as well. So you need technologists at the table who've done this kind of work before to ensure that all these activities can be successful. And to that, I would say TTS is here to help. We have technologists who've worked on all parts of the modernization lifecycle, and we would be happy to partner with agencies to help you drive successful modernization work in the future. We can help with things like assisted acquisitions, discovery, digital shared services, consulting, enterprise architecture, et cetera. And then we also build and deliver important building blocks and best-in-class tools. We can help you bring in best-class tools from the private sector, and we also deliver products like login.gov, US Web Design System, DAP, search.gov that can be useful to agencies when making architectural choices related to modernization work.
Well, given that, and also your centers of excellence and all the other activities, what I always appreciate is the visibility you have on lots of ideas at work simultaneously, and getting the advantage of that to share with other agencies as well. Must be an interesting view from where you sit. Ann Lewis, thank you. We really appreciate the work you do. Thank you for taking time to share some of your insights and some of your recommendations about infrastructure modernization and the importance of a platform approach for federal agencies. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much, Wyatt. It was really great to be here.